What's going on, guys? Welcome back to my channel. This is Blood Phantom 81. In this video, we're going to be talking about everyone's favorite SPAC, which is Hyliion, ticker symbol HYLN. We're going to be talking about my position in Hyliion and also do an overview of what Hyliion is. It shouldn't really be too long because at this point you should know what Hyliion is if you are a speculative investor. So let's just jump right into it. So we'll start off with my position. And so I opened up the video with saying this was everybody's favorite or favorite speculative position. But obviously what happened is we had a high here of about $55, which I'm sure there was a ton of chasers, and it basically crumbled. The lowest point over the past year was actually at 824. So this is actually enough to break a lot of hearts. I wouldn't be surprised if anywhere between the 12 to $8 range is where a lot of folks actually sold out. But from my perspective, this is actually when I was scooping up shares. And let's go ahead and take a look at some of my recent history. There are some covered calls here, which I'll talk about later on throughout the rest of the video. But for the most part, we can talk about some of the buys that I've been making here. 75 shares at 863, 25 shares at 863, 20 shares at 812, 5 shares at 812, etc. And then 25 shares at 817 and the like, because anything below $9 to me was a steal. And so I don't know if that's going to be the bottom, but that's not really how I should think about this. A lot of folks are always like, they get upset when they try to find the exact bottom and they don't actually get it, and they're like, "Oh, I'm so dumb. I could have bought even lower." But that's not actually the way to think about it, in my opinion. It's about expected returns. And speaking of expected returns, if we go ahead and take a look at a chart of Hyliion, the least risky time to be investing in Hyliion from an expected returns perspective is actually in this range versus this range, right? Because there's a lot more risk to have a lower return, even a negative return, if you're investing up in here. Or you're going to have to wait a lot longer in order for your investment to actually realize that return. Let's talk about a couple things here, which is the moving averages. So Hyliion in particular, I have the 50 and 100-day moving averages shown up on the screen. If we notice throughout the uptrend, let's actually take them one at a time. Throughout the uptrend, we had the 50-day moving average support, right? Support, support. Once we lost it, started acting as resistance. We tried to get back above it. I remember this was like a 30% day, up day. We stayed above it for a little bit, almost looked like it was going to be acting as support, but then we actually lost it, and then it actually acted as resistance on the way down. But now things are starting to play out a little bit differently because this moving average is starting to slope upwards. And so when it's sloping upwards, that sort of indicates that from actually the 50-day moving average perspective, this is actually in an uptrend now. And it's starting to slope upwards, meaning it could potentially act as support going forward. And also comparing these two time periods, we've been staying above the 50-day moving average a lot longer here than here. This was almost just like a spike and like the fallout after that inevitable spike. This is sort of more of like a sustained uptrend. And so I'm not saying that this was the bottom, but I do want to, make a point here, which is obviously we can see Hyliion made a series of higher or lower lows and lower highs throughout this downtrend. And what we saw here was this low was actually not even that much lower than this previous low, potentially signifying that buyers or sellers are getting a little bit exhausted here. And so buyers stepped in, pushed it above the 50-day moving average. Let's go ahead and throw on the 100-day. And it looks like this actually is definitely more of a line in the sand, in the sense that this is actually where we got rejected the first time, once we actually lost this. So let's think about it this way. Between June 20th all the way to October 14th of 2020, uptrend. Beneath this is a downtrend. And so we'll see if we're able to have a sustained series of moves above this moving average, because once these two start acting as support, it's gonna, obviously gonna help the buyers in the short term and the long run. And then the biggest hurdle, in my opinion, right here is this horizontal line, which is around the 1550, maybe even like high 14s range. So let's say about $15 of resistance, which to me is basically like, if we can get back above this, that's probably the, where I'd start to become a little more optimistic about Hyliion's future. But like I said, I'm not gonna be upset if this isn't the bottom. I'm just gonna buy more around the $8 range, right? If it gets there. And I'm not trying to, treat this as me trying to time the exact bottom. let's actually even take a look at my position. My average cost isn't even that great. It's, it's only 11.39 because I've been buying since like 14, 15 most likely, and it's only 1.5% of my portfolio, so it doesn't matter if it's if it keeps going lower. It's just a speculative position. But yeah, so I'm basically in this for the mid to long term, and obviously we know the potential is sky high. The problem with a lot of these SPACs is that optimism just creates these waves of euphoria, and that's what starts to spook me personally as a long-term investor. Let's go ahead and take a look at Churchill Capital. Same exact thing, right? These waves of euphoria are actually pretty scary. These are not the times you want to actually be getting into to anything, especially those that are SPAC related, because we know how violent these run-ups can be, suck in a lot of buyers, and then the fallout is always pretty dramatic. You have folks losing 40, 50, 60, 70% of their position depending on how hard they chased it. But before people start saying things like, oh, Blood Phantom is starting to talk about speculative stuff and SPACs now. So again, I do want to make that point of, while yes, these are speculative positions, number one, this is a tiny percentage of my overall net worth, let alone my overall Robinhood portfolio, because I do have other portfolios, but just a tiny percentage of my Robinhood portfolio. And number two, just because anything has to do with the SPAC doesn't mean it's necessarily risky or bad. I think that's kind of a pretty one-dimensional way to look at things if you automatically assume, oh, this thing has something to do with the SPAC, it must be bad. Because Hyliion has basically a lot of the things that you would want out of something that you want to hold for the long term. So definitely have way more tailwinds than headwinds, in my opinion. That's not to say that they're a layup, because they have a lot of hurdles to get through. And there's still like a lot of speculative stuff to think about. Like, for example, I think about them as like a pharmaceutical company, where pharmaceutical companies always have, like, let's say, upcoming trials, and depending on the success of those trials, that could really severely impact the future success of the company. Hyliion is kind of like that, not exactly as dramatic, but what I'm trying to say is they always have a series of tests that they have to keep passing, keep passing, keep passing. And so let's go ahead and take a look at Hyliion from a financial perspective real quick. So super small company, less than 100 employees, and then market cap of 2.46 billion. Can you imagine buying Hyliion up here, at like a 7 billion valuation, or even close to 10 billion valuation? I could not justify that, but anything under 3 billion, I could, definitely justify that. And just to wrap up that last point about, speculative stocks. So again, I'm not selling out. It's just that we have to start to consider these investments once they crash this much, right? There's minimized risk when we start to look at investments from this lens rather than from a hype lens. And so I'll just wrap up the video with just very, very quickly. We all know what Hyliion is at this point, just in case you don't. So they're basically trying to revolutionize the transportation industry. They're all about clean energy. They have natural gas converters, basically. And they basically replace the current engine of already existing trucks with Hyliion's technology, and that's how they plan on disrupting the overall market. And so again, lots of tailwinds for Hyliion in the upcoming future. Let me know if you guys want to see more videos like this. If you made it this far, go ahead and give me a thumbs up. Let's see if we can get this video to 10 likes. That would be awesome. And yeah, if you guys are interested in seeing more content, feel free to subscribe, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.